We will now look at VINALOD, and that's the visualization of linked open data. For that, we have three speakers with us this afternoon, and they will be sharing the presentation. So please welcome Simon Steuer, who's head of sector at the Publication Office of the EU, Hagar Lowenthal, who's knowledge management assistant at the European Commission Joint Research Centre, and Teresa Barrueco, who's expert in data visualization. Welcome to all three of you. And over to you. And I don't know who will start, but...
So thanks so much for this kind introduction, and thanks so much to the Endorse team for having us and present our project. So we operate the Data Europa EU portal, which has 1.5 million data sets, and a lot of this is also linked to different catalogs, to different data sets. And we wanted to think of a solution how to visualize and to navigate like this wealth of information. And Hagar and Teresa will tell you more about this.
Hello. So I will start by presenting the project. In the Publications Office, as this convention demonstrates, we make extensive use of linked data, enriched with also specific ontologies and controlled vocabularies. It's all stored in triple stores. So there is the seller triple store, which was mentioned many times before. On Data Europa, there has its own triple store. So a lot of data assets, but how do we see the links? This poses a real problem because except for the complexity of RDF and SPARQL syntax, which I think has been mentioned in many of the sessions in these last 3 days, you also need to really know the different ontologies and data models behind it. Just to run a quick query on Seller, there are more than 1,000 properties. How do you know which one is relevant to your question and which one is not? So just getting to know the model can be quite tiring and requires a lot of work. So, let's move to the next slide. This is why we thought of this project, which was financed by the Parliamentary Action on Linked Open Data. Our hope was to give user-friendly view in a visual way of linked data used in the Publications Office. And for this, Teresa, who will shortly present the results, who is a data viz expert and a linked data expert as well, I would say. Constructed this tool to help us navigate through all the different assets. If we go to the next slide. So the idea was to see all the richness of the different assets managed by the Publications Office. So you have Eurolex, you have the reference data, of course, and then you have all the publications, and then the open data portal as well. So the 1.5 million and more data sets. How do they talk to each other? And with this tool, you can see not only how they talk to each other, but also beyond. For example, we used a few links to Wikidata via the Who is Who graph. And the application is really nice. It's a standalone. Basically, it runs on your browser as you go through it. It takes the data from the SPARQL endpoint, so the data is always up to date, but you don't have to write any queries. It does it for you. And I think maybe the best thing to do now is hand over to you, Teresa, so you can show us VINALOD.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is the main page in VINALOD, where we can select a basic or expert mode. If we choose basic, we can choose a collection from the drop-down menu, and all graph options for the collection will be shown. In next slide, this is an example of a network graph that can be displayed for the EU vocabularies collection. In next slide, this is an example of the EU institutions graph under the EU Who is Who collection. We have clicked on Commission, and the graph has been expanded with the sub-organization for the Commission. In next slide. Every time we click on a node, we can see the options for that node in the contextual menu. These options can include expand a new branch or show another graph or a table. In this example, we see the options for the Publications Office node in the EU institutions graph. Next slide. This is an example of one of those options. It's a word cloud of the publication keywords for the Publications Office. There is a mistake here. It's not the organization chart. It's the publication keywords. Next slide. Another interesting feature is the navigation panel. Every time we expand the graph, we can see the navigation history in the navigation panel. In this example, we started in the European Commission under European Union, and we go to Publications Office. Inside Publications Office, we go to Access to and Reuse of Public Information, and then to EU Open Data and Cortis, and we can see the organizations inside that organization. Next slide. This is an example of one of the options we saw before. This is the table membership and persons, where a table has been shown with all members of the European Parliament that are part of the Agri Committee. Next slide. This is an example of a Wikipedia page that is an option when we click on a person, in this case, the chair of the Agri Committee, and we click on that node and we can see the Wikipedia page for that person. Next slide. This is a graph, the option, the collection is EU data, and the option is catalogs of data sets, the data sets of open data in Data Europa EU. Next slide. These are, if we click on a catalog, the previous page, we can go to the data sets for that catalog. And these data sets are organized by data catalog, for data themes, sorry. In this case, we have clicked on the Spatial Data Portal Italy, Politics is the data theme, and then we go to a data set, and then we can go to the data.europa.eu link. We have a link in the navigation panel, and we can go to the page with that link. Next slide. This is the same thing in the navigation for publication themes classification. In this case, we go to a publication theme, trade. Under that theme, we go to external trade, and we choose an author, in this case, delegation to Canada, and we can choose a publication for that author under that theme. And we have a link to the PDF where we can see the PDF for that publication. Next slide. This is an example of a graph in EU law collection. It's a graph that shows summaries of EU legislation. It's the same thing as before. It's always, there is a topic, in this case, external trade, and we can navigate under that topic to development and sustainability, and we can see the summaries for that topic, the summaries of EU legislation, and we can go to the document by the link in the navigation panel. Next slide. Here we are going to see the expert mode. We have seen the basic mode. In the expert mode, we are starting navigating by an URI and getting triples, subject, property, object from it. Next slide. Here there is an URI as subject, and we can see the objects from that subject in the navigation panel also. Next slide. As we can see, we navigate in the same way as in the basic mode with a contextual menu. Next slide. If the results are over 200, we can choose a number, but it's in 200 by default. We will have the result collapsed in one node, and we can add them to the graph from the navigation panel. Next slide. This is a more complex example where, after navigating through several URIs that we can see in the navigation panel that is split, we arrive to an URI that represents an agreement of a non-member state. Next slide. In this example, this agreement is about the Eurobug concept of Australia, so it must be an agreement with Australia. As we have a basic graph that shows publications for Eurobug concept, we can link both expert and basic graphs by the Eurobug concept URI, and we can see the linking node in red. Next slide. This is a navigation panel for the whole navigation from the first URI where we started after the Eurobug concept Australia, after we have selected the publications for that Eurobug concept. We have chosen an author, in this case, Directorate General for Trade, a publication, and a PDF and a link to the PDF. And last thing to mention is that we can share a graph by email, or we can save it and work on it later. Next steps are in next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. So the next step for VINALOD is the extension of the tool. We can do it by adding more graphs. Every time we add a line to the config file, we have a new graph that can be extended, and we can add more graphs like this. And it will be integrated in data.europa.eu, where we are in the implementation phase. So that's it from my side.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all three of you. We do have a couple of questions. So the first one is very concrete and practical. Can we have access to the tool, and when and who can?
Yes, for the moment it's in a GitHub repository. We can give you the link, and we were supposed to give it to the organization so you can provide with this information. Sorry for not adding it in the presentation. And yes, you can go and try it, and it will be integrated in data.europa.eu very soon, and it will be an option in the board. Very good.
Yeah, and it's available for everyone, so you don't need to be a specific user.
And okay. It's also, the GitHub code will be available when we finish the implementation for everybody.
Very good. And which extensions are envisaged for the VINALOD tool for the future?
For the moment, we don't have any extension yet, but we are open to have, because we have to start at extensions, but we are open to any ideas, because as you can send an email with a link to a graph, if someone has an idea, I can send, I would like to have a graph like this, and they can show us the graph in the expert mode, of course, and we can translate that to basic mode. So we are open to new ideas from anybody.
Thank you. I'm sure you're going to get feedback on this from our audience. One final point. Can we navigate across the knowledge graphs, for example, from one organization to publications or data sets issued by this same organization?
You can link, you can start in publications, and you can end up in EU law summaries, because you will have, in this case, it's not a good example, but you can start in a point and finish in another point, because all is linked. So you will have the options in the menu, and depending on the option that you choose, you will end up somewhere or somewhere else. So everything is linked. It has to be specified in the config file, of course. So if there is a link, a missing link, again, someone can write us and give us the idea to link to graphs.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all three of you for joining us this afternoon and for indeed being very open about more exchanges beyond the conference. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.